Hey, this is Connor from Biker's Edge. Today I'm out riding the Transition Spur. It's a bike that we didn't really expect from Transition. It's super lightweight, kind of XC oriented, but true to Transition's form. It's pretty good on the downhill too. So big goal of today is to try to figure out what type of bike it is. Is it an XC bike? Is it a trail bike? You know, does it fall somewhere in between? So stick around and find out. Actually, wait, we have a link in our description down below in this video. If you want to try demoing any bike from Biker's Edge, hit that link. You'll get hooked up with a discounted demo. Come in, tell us you came from YouTube, get 20 bucks off a demo. So if you want to demo a bike, check out that link. So let's get to it. All right, just a little bit into my climb here. The very first thing I'm noticing about the Spur is it does not feel like a cross-country bike. You know, it doesn't have kind of that like narrow handlebar, long stretched out cockpit feel to it. It feels a lot like a trail bike when you get on it. Performance-wise, it handles more like a cross-country bike. With how quick it is and how efficient it is, but just the feel, it doesn't feel very XC, which is great. You're not racing XC, you just want like a good solid trail bike. That's a good confident feeling. So the Spur is a bit of a unique bike for Transition. Most of their bikes are just all out party, very downhill oriented. Even their Smuggler which is their kind of shortish travel 29 trail bike. It's heavy, stiff, stout, just ready to party. So this bike's a little bit different. It's very light. You can get builds right around 25 pounds, which is pretty impressive. So overall, it's something a little different from Transition, but at the same time, still has a bit of their flavor to it. You know, for a cross-country bike, it's really slack at 66 degrees. It's got a long reach, long wheelbase. So it's a pretty interesting bike. And I'm very excited to spend some time on it, see what it's all about. So I'm up here in Park City. It's probably about 400 degrees outside. I'm coming off of 2 months of sitting on the bench with a broken neck. So I'm super out of shape. But this bike actually makes this climb not feel all that bad. I'm running about 28% sag, and I've got the rear shock fully open. The bike feels plenty efficient. There's a lot of traction, which is great. The back end's not skipping around on every little rock and bump, so that makes for a good climber. When companies find that balance between just all out efficiency and traction. You know, if you're just 100% efficient, you don't have any pedal bob, a lot of times that back end will bounce around, skip around. When things get steep and loose, you lose traction. And on the other hand, if you have too much traction, you're bobbing up and down a lot. So this bike finds a good middle ground, I think. So far on the uphill, this bike feels great. It's very quick, very efficient. It's not like XC race bike feeling. You know, you jump on like a blur, and this bike doesn't feel like that. It feels a little more trail bikey, but still more efficient, better at climbing than your tall boy or the Optic or even the Ibis Ripley. So it's not quite a trail bike, and it's not quite a cross-country bike. I don't really know what to call it. I'd say it leans more towards the XC spectrum than the trail bike though, at least on the uphill. This bike rolls on Maxxis Dissector front tire and a Recon rear. So as far as XC bikes go, that's a pretty aggressive tire combo. The Spur has 120 millimeters of rear travel and 120 front. So on the longer side of things for a cross-country bike, closer to that trail bike category. Although you can run a shorter shock and drop the rear travel to 100. I don't think I'd ever do that. It pedals well enough, feels good enough with the 120. The unique thing about the Spur is it doesn't use a bearing or a bushing at the rear axle for the pivot. It just relies on frame flex. So it saves them quite a bit of weight, and they're able to still give you a good suspension feel. I think I picked the worst day to leave my water bottle in the truck. I've got a long ride ahead of me and no water. So if I die in the woods somewhere, I apologize for not finishing this video. I think one of my goals for this video is to figure out where this bike falls in the spectrum of XC to trail. But just with the numbers and the geometry, it's kind of hard to categorize. I just want to see what it rides like. You know, if it rides like a Tallboy or a Ripley, or if it rides like a Blur or an Oath. After riding for a minute, it's pretty surprising how much ground you can cover so quickly. It just keeps rolling quickly and efficiently. It doesn't slow you down, hold you back. It kind of just doesn't call attention to itself on the climbs. You just climb and cover ground fast. Getting close to the top of my climb now. I died for the last 10 or 15 minutes, but I'm going to attribute that to leaving my water bottle in the truck. This bike does a great job of covering a lot of ground quickly. It's not like the sprintiest or the fastest XC bike. While it's plenty fast, it's more of like an XC marathon maybe, where you're trying to put in a lot of miles, cover a lot of ground quickly. So overall, I think I'm gonna go A- on the climbing grade. It is not the fastest outright climber, but it does a great job. All right, starting out the downhill here. There's a couple of things I'm paying attention to. The first is gonna be small bump. A lot of these XC bikes don't have the best small bump performance. They're a little too firm. So I'm gonna be paying attention to that, seeing how this bike does in the chatter. The second is gonna be cornering. You know, I want this bike to be zippy, to get around the corner well. The third thing is kind of how jibby or playful this bike is. See how fun it is there. And then the last is just, you know, how confident is this? How hard can I push a 120 mil travel bike? So one of the first things I'm noticing is the suspension isn't overly plush, but you know, it's nice and supportive, which is good if you've only got 120 millimeters of it. You don't want to be blowing through it, you know. You want it to hold you up in corners and landings and stuff. So I like how the suspension feels. Wow, it does get around the corner pretty well. I do like that. Some of these loose, like falling away corners, like that one, I can't quite trust the tires. But when you've got good support in the corner, you can really push into it. It just rockets you out the other side. That's great. When you get back on the gas, bike goes. It's pretty quick. I opted for the large, so kind of the snappier size. It still feels pretty stable. When I get going faster, feels stable and calm. This is a sick bike for this trail. This is the kind of trail that's, I think, they had in mind when they made this. It's fast, mostly flowy, lots of fun little in and out corners. few jumps. Man, great bike for this trail. If you're wondering, I'm on Flying Dog in the Jeremy Ranch, Park City area. One of the longest sustained downhills, actually. I mean, it's almost 20 minutes. Some of these corners are blind, and this is a multi-directional trail. So taking it a little easy. I don't want to pummel anybody. All right, so the suspension feels, like I was saying, really firm. In some of these rocky bits when you're going fast, the bike's getting bounced around just a little bit. Not uncontrollable, but you know, you don't have a lot of suspension there soaking things up for you. I do like the firm supportive feel. It's great for getting in and out of a corner, jumping. And speaking of corners, I love how this bike corners. Kind of dive in, pump through it, and you rock it out the other side. It's really good. So on the downhill, this bike rides more like the Tallboy than it does the Blur. I keep going back to those two as a comparison because it's easy. And most folks are familiar with those bikes, but it rides more like a trail bike on the downhill than it does an XC bike. I've never felt this comfortable or confident on an XC bike, jumping and hitting rocks fast and being semi-aggressive in the corners. Normally I feel a little timid and wobbly, but this one is nice and stable. Doesn't really hold you back, which is great that you get a bike that really emphasizes climbing performance, but it doesn't really sacrifice on the way you ride it downhill. I'm honestly pretty surprised at how good it feels going downhill based on how well it went uphill. So I do like how well this bike gets in the air. It's not, I wouldn't say it's super jibby or jumpy. I think the Tallboy there is more playful. I think you can kind of get into that suspension and get a little more pop out of it on the Tallboy, where this, you know, it's a little harder to get airborne. It'll do it, and it lands really well. It's not janky or sketchy on the landings, but you know, there's not a ton of that like built-in boing. There's a better word for it. So I've got two people in mind that I think would really enjoy this bike. One is the ex-cross country racer, or you know, used to do a lot of cross country, but now you looking for a little more confidence and a little more comfort. Recommend this guy. I think if you're trying to keep up with your kids on the high school cross country teams or something, but you just can't bring yourself to ride a full XC bike, this is a great one. I think this is the XC bike for people who wear knee pads and baggies, and you're looking to still get after it on the downhill and not be limited by your bike in what you can do or how fast you can go. I think if you enjoy kind of pushing it on the descents, but a little bit of you kind of likes the thought of having a cross country bike for mellower days or for big trails, big rides, I think you'd really enjoy this bike. So the GoPro battery died. We're going to finish this video up right here. The Transition Spur. Is it a cross country bike? Is it a trail bike? On the uphill, kind of falls right in between the two. You know, I'd say it's a little closer to the XC side of things, but still not quite full XC bike efficient. But then on the downhill, I think it holds its own with the trail bikes. I think if you put it up against like a Santa Cruz Tallboy and Ibis Ripley, it would definitely hold its own. Maybe the Norco optic has a little edge on it, but that optic's kind of a freak when it comes to downhill. So if you like fast bikes uphill, you like doing big rides, doing a lot of elevation, covering a lot of ground, but you don't really want a bike to hold you back on the way back downhill, 10 out of 10, recommend the Transition Spur. If you want to demo that bike, again, remember, we've got the link down below. Check that out, and we'll see you next time.
step up, jump round.